Scaling any brand to hundreds of locations takes more than timing. It takes vision, systems, culture, and the guts to lead in a crowded market. Now, in this episode, we're going to break down the blueprint behind one company's rise from a startup to a global franchise and the big business lessons and the leadership lessons that you can learn from it.
Welcome to Fortify Live with your host, Saeks.
Today, our guest is Kyle Jones. He's the CEO and co-founder of iCryo, a rapidly expanding recovery and wellness brand. Now, with a mission to elevate lifestyles through affordable and professional health services, iCryo has grown to over 200 locations with plans to build over 1,000 locations in several countries. Kyle, what inspired you to transition from a background in sports and physical therapy into a CEO and a founder of a franchise brand?
Yeah. It's interesting. I always tell people, there's one or two pivotal moments in people's lives where I feel like it's almost like the too good to be true mentality, and they kind of avoid it and keep going down that normal path in life. And I've always told myself, I don't want to be normal. I want to be abnormal. I want to go down that other path that most people are scared to go down. And that was a moment in life for me. I was pursuing a football career. I was playing Division II college ball. I love the sport. I love athletics. I've always been, a guy that's built up on structure and team environment. And so being in a sport was kind of what I thought was my calling. And in college, I actually pivoted a little bit. I had a coach / mentor at the time that said, hey, man, you are actually a lot more honed in on wellness as a whole, not just the sport itself, but all the things that make you a good athlete on the field. And so I took his advice. I steered away from sports, which was a bummer. I miss it, but pursued something a little bit more broad stroke. So I went into exercise science, kinesiology. I really love the biomechanics of the body. I love the way the body operates. And so I just became fascinated, not just with physical wellness and physical well-being, but with mental wellness and mental well-being. And so how the human brain operates with the body in conjunction to really perform at its peak. And so that led me down an entire path of, biohacking and, the recovery side of things, being more proactive than reactive, which I think was a big shift when COVID hit. You saw people becoming more proactive with their health. And so for me, that's what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about, truly making the world a healthier place. So for me, it's all about being intentional with my time and being intentional with my company to make sure that we can do that and succeed. And our services can be part of like a massive, I would say, global expansion to make the world a better place.
Well, it's such a great vision and mission to have. We're live right now on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and a few other places. And the audio from this episode becomes the Business Growth Show podcast. So if you haven't subscribed, everybody, go subscribe to the podcast so we can up the listeners. But we're talking today with Kyle Jones, a CEO and co-founder, of iCryo. But I want you to tell our listeners and viewers, and we've got listeners that are franchise brands, franchisees, private equity groups, a lot of entrepreneurs, anybody who's interested in business growth, in operations, marketing, sales, AI, that type of thing. But what is the company? So someone listening who might not know about your locations, what is the value proposition and what has allowed you to excel in a very competitive market?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've told our franchisees, I've told everybody on the team that we have to be a very agile company. And what I mean by that is when we started in this space, when I got into this space 13 years ago, it was just cryotherapy. We didn't offer anything else. About a year later, we bolted on compression therapy. And about a year later, we bolted on infrared sauna therapy. And we just kind of kept steering our growth with where the space was actually taking us, right? It used to just be recovery and wellness services. We didn't have any medical services back in 2013, 14, 15. And then all of a sudden you saw the IV infusion industry really take off from year, 2015 to 2020. So we bolted on medical services in 2019. We became a legitimate medical franchise in 2021. They're now coining it the medtail space, where medical meets retail. So it's a full-on medical facility, a physician practice in every way. We are practicing medicine, so back-end operationally, logistically, we operate just like an urgent care or, a physician office that you would go for primary care. We operate just like a physician practice because legally we are. Now, on the front end, we don't want to look like a clinic. We don't want to look like a medical facility, right? Nobody wants to go to the doctor. It's a very, I would say, depressing environment to be in. So when you walk into an iCryo, we're very retail friendly. The aesthetics of the building, it's very warming, comforting, inviting. I would consider ourselves a premium brand, but with pricing for the masses. And so that's always been our kind of a hybrid approach of we want to be a very retail friendly environment so people know that it's a home away from home. But secondarily to that, we are practicing medicine. So one of our core values is professionalism. We operate at the highest level of standards from compliance. And so for us, creating that franchise model, it took us into another, I would say, stratosphere of services. So we were able to bolt on, regenerative medicine products, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, ozone UV IV therapy, an entire line of IV infusions where we supply, NAD injections, NAD infusions. Really the portfolio of offerings going into the medical model really uncuffed us. All the things that we couldn't do before, we now can do. Intramuscular injections, whether it's vitamin D, or certain boosters in an IV bag. We just have such a plethora of an offering where when people look at the logo, they think just cryotherapy.
Right. That's what I would have thought if I didn't know any better, right?
Yep. We offer so much more than that. It truly is a full suite of longevity services.
Well, I think some of the takeaways that our listeners can take from, again, I have experts on the show that talk about their franchising journey. And if you listen to what Kyle's saying, he's very intentional. And if you listen to how he's answering the questions, he's talking about the customer experience. Yes, he's adding all these extra things, but he's not doing it to diversify or diversify. He's doing it because there's a demand. And if he can be the single source place, like, so for me, I was a Olympic caliber speed skater. I was a pro cyclist in another life. Now I'm a little older. I still ride stuff. But so recently I got hired and I did a keynote for some IV therapy companies, probably competitors of yours, and like Prime IV and Game Day Men's Health. And I just got booked to speak at the opening conference for Spire Brands, who does IV therapy or does red light therapy, right? So, but I'm seeing a lot more in this space. Now, the good news is there's a huge need for it, right? So no lack consciousness. There's opportunities out there for everybody. But one of the things like that I've seen, like even at Game Day Men's Health, is when I first went in there to do the pre-event tour before I spoke at their keynote, because I'm not going to go in and speak to their franchisees about local marketing or how to grow without understanding the brand. But I had no idea. I went in the first day, they took blood, they gave me a PSA test, they checked my testosterone. Like, I didn't know you could just walk in to do that. And so hearing some of the things that you're doing, but the breadth of what you're doing seems a lot more comprehensive. Like, I don't have a location yet in my area. So that's, and by the way, for anybody listening to this, this is not a solicitation to buy or own a franchise. This episodes and all my episodes are for educational and informational purposes where we talk about business growth. But the topic of this is really exciting to me because I'm always looking for ways to be healthier, happier. I know teams are, I know organizations are, because with their employees. And one of the things I did was I gave my team, IV therapy as a bonus. We all went to lunch and we went and we had IV, and I didn't even know what it was. I'm walking in and they're showing me this menu of services and I'm like, well, I've heard of B12. Do I need B12? I'm ignorant, right, Kyle? But I think what's really important is that what you've done is you found a need, you're accelerating, and you're really creating a customer experience where they can really, I don't want to dumb it down to a one-stop shop, but you really are looking at it holistically, what their needs are, as opposed to just trying to sell a certain product or service.
Correct. 100%. You nailed it on the money. Being intentional about our service offering, being intentional about, what the market is ready for. I will tell you, when we look at a service, when I look at a modality, and we're very, very forward thinking, we usually bolt on products way before our competitors do, because we want to be the front runners in that. We want to be the innovation side of the company. We want to be the forward leading aspect, the pioneers of our space. And so, we 3 check boxes before we onboard a service. Number one, does it even work? Does it have the clinical backing to support the things that it's advertised and being said, right? And so at the end of the day, if there's no supporting evidence to it, we don't want it, right? I don't want snake oil. I don't want things that aren't proven. I want real products that deliver real results so our guests can get real solutions to their problems. Secondarily to that, after you kind of pass that phase one of the product does work and it does have clinical evidence to support it. Number two, honestly, is the price point there. Is it too expensive for the market, right? Is the market ready for something like that? Because I didn't start this company to just reach the 1%ers. I started this company to reach the masses, the 8+ billion people around the planet that need our services. They have to be able to afford it. And so the second piece of it is affordability. Can we enter it into the franchise model and people can actually spend the dollars to make sure that they're doing this on an ongoing basis? And that's usually one of the triggers that doesn't pass muster. The third piece, which is probably the most important piece, is awesome. You got the clinical science that shows it's efficacious. Secondarily to that, there's a price point that we can go to market that makes sense for the guests to buy it. Third, is the awareness even there? Are people aware of what this is? And I will tell you, we looked at red light therapy back in 2013, 2014. Nobody knew what red light therapy was. That's right. Nobody. And so we paused. We said, you know what? We got to wait for the market to really understand what is red light therapy. And in 2021, I think it was, red light exploded. I mean, thousands of clinical studies started being produced. Everybody started to get on this wave. And so we bolted on red light therapy at the right time. And so at the end of the day, that's kind of the metrics we look for, because like you said, it's being intentional with the things that you put on that menu, because if you don't put the right things on there at the right time, at the right price point, it's going to fail.
Yeah. And I've always taught, in a keynote or a strategy session, the confused mind says no. Like if I walk into a cheesecake factory, I don't want to read a manual before I order dinner. I was like, bring me something that's really popular on the menu. Like you probably should do better food choices. But the point is, a confused mind says no. And what I like about what you guys are doing is you're really looking at this from the customer's needs first, and then looking at what's the best solution. You're vetting all the solutions so that they are premium. And I think that's really smart. How you've been able to grow so quickly and will continue the trajectory that you're on, to maybe 1,000 locations as soon as possible, is because you're offering something that's really needed. You have an aging marketplace. You have confusion in the marketplace, so they're looking for resources. You've got, cool interiors. When I say cool, I mean they're aesthetically pleasing. It's a really neat environment from what I've seen online when I went and looked. And then it gives them a way to be remarkable. So going back to the point of the business side of it, the challenging side, what is something you do to keep because you're doing so many different things and they require a certain level of expertise, right? This is not just a simple thing that someone can just open up a franchise tomorrow and do, right? That it has medical relations and data and everything. So what are you doing to help ensure that your franchise system is following your systems? And the reason I ask this is because I did some work for a different healthcare company, not in this space. And I was live in front of like 700 franchisees. And one guy said, well, why can't I sell lottery tickets in my store? Like, they're coming into my store anyway. I want the traffic. Why does it hurt if I just put a little point of purchase display to sell lottery tickets? And I said, look, here's the problem with that. The problem is if they come into your location and get lottery tickets and you're a franchise brand and now they're traveling and they're in another location and they walk into a franchise to get why they would get lottery tickets from a health service, it's a nutrition company. Now it was that's about as far as I'll go, a nutrition company, which everybody can figure out what initials they were, right? Okay. So, but I said, look, you can't do that because then it's going to hurt the brand, because if you start offering, and I've done this with, Cookie Dough Bliss and a few other quick serve restaurant places, that they try to add something without the franchise or knowing, like they're like, well, it won't hurt. I can just put this over here in the corner. And then, the franchise, regional consultant comes in and finds out, like, what the hell is that? So what have you done to ensure that your franchisees stay in their lane, use their systems, but then obviously create a feedback loop if there is something new that you want to offer?
Correct. So many great points there. I mean, we've done so many things to ensure that everybody stays uniform. We do a few things on that front. We have a weekly weekly organization call. So everybody in the entire organization logs in every week on a Wednesday at 1 p.m.
Yep.
It's everybody from the part-time sales associate in Fort Lauderdale to me, the CEO of the franchise, right? Everybody logs in. We talk about a specific topic that week. We make sure that we're staying in sync with systems, with policies, procedures, protocols. The operations manual, as you know, is the Bible of the franchise, right? So at the end of the day, making sure that everything we do changes systematically, but changes at the same time. And that's communicated the right way. Secondarily to that, we do have a franchisee advisory committee. So we've got group of high-performing franchisees that are kind of the sounding board for the field. When you get past 25 locations open, it's hard to have conversations with every single franchisee and to get that feedback. So we created what we call the IAIF, the International Association of iCryo Franchisees. They're the sounding board for the field. We meet once a month and talk about, things that are happening in the field, things that aren't happening in the field that should be. And it's our way to stay connected to our franchisees. And that way they're always heard. They can always send us feedback. They can always give us the real life situation that's happening on the ground at the locations. And we can pivot at corporate and make changes collectively as a group. And I would say the one answer to your question of how do we keep the systems intact is our culture. I talk about the culture in iCryo nonstop. If you were to walk into any location across the system, they bleed blue. They bleed iCryo. And that's the one thing I can say without a doubt. Our franchisees are incredible. We have some of the best franchisees on the planet, real, genuine human beings, not just business professionals. But at the end of the day, it's like you have to be very, very critical about onboarding the right franchisees that aren't just about making money. They really, truly believe in the mission. They believe in the vision. They understand and they adopt and they embody the core values of what that franchise is set on. And so mission, vision, values is huge for us. I want to make sure that the company as a whole knows the mission that I had set out for day one. I want to make sure they know the vision of the brand and where we're heading, and they communicate that to their team. And then outside of that, we have to live our core values, not just speak them, not just say them. We have to live by that, which creates the culture of the company. And so for me, I tout it from the mountaintops. Everybody I talk to, the reason why iCryo is where we're at today is because of the franchisees that are in the field speaking and living the brand. And it's the culture of the company that has got us to where we are.
Well, it certainly is. I mean, in franchising, there's these magic numbers, right? They reach 25 units, 50, 100 is, most of them never reach 100 units, right? And then from there, it's like 100 to 500 units. So, you're at the 200 mark. So you're well on your way, because as you grow, the systems change, the problems change, the ability to change. What I like about what you're doing, and it's not just lip service. So those of you listening and watching this episode, it's not just lip service with mission, vision, and values. Too often, those are just posters, or it's an event that they do once a year and it's not really lived. And the franchise brands that I've had the opportunity, because I've been in franchise now for 34 years, spoken at over 1,000 franchise companies, and I've had the opportunity to see the ones that, because I get to do this. I get to interview you, who's got 200 locations, and find out what you've done, right? And so I get this, and the ones that have really excelled, you can tell live it and breathe it, and they're franchisees, and they have a culture of what's acceptable and what's not, and it goes from their culture to their leadership, to the management, to the team, to the customer experience, to how they communicate and how they deal with challenges, because problems are going to come up. I mean, people always say, well, that's great, but what happens when there's a challenge? Well, if you live your values and you come from that, it's just like customer experience. It's like, I have to travel a lot for my job. I mean, I'm traveling coast to coast, speaking at conferences, and I watch the stuff that happens in airports, and I watch the stuff that happens in the airline industry, because it's real easy to talk about customer experience with the airlines just because it's in the news every single day, right? Millions of people traveling. But it's so interesting that the gate agent or the ticket person, they don't realize that they're the face of the business. And I was just on the phone this morning with a different client that does employee benefits. They're in insurance space and they do employee benefits. And I said, well, how many people do you have in your organization? And they said, around 480. And I said, well, how many people involved in the customer experience? And she said, well, we've got a customer service team of 22. And I'm like, no, you have 480, because any touch point you have with the customer is part of your business. It doesn't matter what label they have. It doesn't matter what name they have. If they're involved in your business, they're involved in the customer experience at some level. And it's amazing how that once you create a culture of that where everybody comes in and what's acceptable, then the culture supports itself, right? It's not something where you have to dictate to them. It's something that they live. And I think that's what you guys have done.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, you nailed it right on the money. And the culture is what drives our mission. It really is. I mean, and once again, when we vet out a franchisee from day one, a prospective franchisee that hasn't signed a franchise agreement, one of the first questions we ask them is, are you passionate about this space? Like, are you truly wanting to be here? Because our business and most franchises are dependent on the operator.
Oh, yeah, they're owner-operator. Yeah.
You could have a great brand. You could have a great team. You could have great services. You could have an awesome marketing plan. It's solely relying on the operator. Is the operator going to actually put in the work and do what the franchise model is telling them to do? Now, different markets are different in that way. And so I always tell people a franchise isn't 100% bulletproof, right? You have to put in your own work. You have to put in your effort to make sure that that's successful. And you have to speak it and believe it and live it every day. And so, I always say that people can feel energy. It's a proven and known fact that the transfer of energy is real. And so if you, the business owner, don't speak and believe and live your core values and live that culture and that vision, your team sees it, your guest sees it, people around you can feel it and observe it, and nobody buys in at that point. At the end of the day, I always tell people your level of commitment is tied to your level of belief. Belief goes up, commitment goes up. Belief goes down, commitment goes down. And so the way that you operate in your belief and your commitment level are so tied, that's how your team operates. And essentially, that's how the organization operates. So for me, it's just driving people on the same boat.
Yeah, I think a lot of times organizations, they want to make it harder than it is. When they ask me about business growth and they'll say, well, we want to grow our business. I'm like, there's only 3 ways to grow to get business. Like from a marketing standpoint, you create it, you borrow it, or you buy it. You create it by communicating and adding value and taking care of the customer and content. You borrow it by who else reaches the same customer you do that could send you referrals. Like in your business, there's a lot of organizations that could send you referrals, but you have to build those relationships in the community. The franchise owner, operator, and their team needs to get out into the community, grassroots marketing, and find those referral partners, build the relationships with them, do the lunch and learns to get the business. So they borrow it or get in the media because they can do the local media. And then of course they can buy it, which obviously that's part of what the brand does is the national brand takes care of the national advertising, but the local brand is responsible for their digital footprint, what shows up locally when someone searches. So, they want to make it more complicated. And I always tell people, look, there's 4 ways to grow a business. Get more high value customers. You don't want more customers. You want more high value customers, right? So I'm the high value customer. I'm the guy that comes in and buys the Orange Theory membership with the unlimited. I'm the one who goes to the Joint and gets the unlimited chiropractic services. Like I'm the one who says, give me the subscription. I'm a CEO. I don't want to don't compare. Don't seduce me with the details. But a lot of times the franchise people doing the onboarding of the new customer, they're trying to sell from their style as opposed to selling from understanding what the customer needs, right? And so get more high value customers. Number 2, how do you increase the average transaction? Well, what I love about you is I can come and get a whole suite of things done. So depending on what my needs are, of course, and my wife's needs, I can get services provided to you. So that's really cool that you've got this menu of eclectic services that can really whole body health and wellness. So how do you increase the average transaction? By making sure that the people in your franchise group, your franchise family, know how to promote. It's not upselling, it's adding value, right? How do they introduce the other services to the ones maybe they came in for A, but they need B, C, D, and E? And then number 3, how do you increase repeated referral sales? And number 4, how do you increase operational efficiency? Which is, I tell our franchisees, follow your systems. Like when I'm hired to brought in, Kyle, I'm a third-party endorsement for that brand because they're already telling their franchisees, they already have a successful system. And if they're going to bring someone from the outside in, they need to echo those things. Otherwise, there's a real disconnect. I just keynoted the Canadian Franchise Association. So it's much smaller than the IFA. I've keynoted the IFA too in the States. But I just left last week, Niagara Falls, where all the local franchises were. And I was the opening keynote and I talked about business growth. And I just said, look, don't make it more complicated than it is. You want your franchisees to follow your systems. The franchisees want you to send more business and they want you to have franchise relations. Like this is there's not new problems, but there's new ways to do it because the economy's changed, the generations have changed, there's increased competition, there's compliance issues, there's all these extra things, especially in your world. Is there any compliance or things on the horizon that are external that you guys are trying to prepare for now? Because I mean, frankly, I don't know. I mean, is there something where someone would say, well, you can't do IV therapy or you can't do this? Have you dealt to overcome those types of things?
We have, and that is such a good question. That is a great topic of discussion. So when we got into this space in 2015, 2016, started to launch the franchise model, we started to get into the medical space in 2019-ish. We had to play by the rules, everything from board of pharmacy to board of nursing to all the state medical boards, all the regulatory and compliance related, I would say, avenues. I mean, it was very complicated. We actually I know a lot of people cut corners. They operated in that gray area for a long time. And I think it's because the governmental agencies didn't understand how to classify what we were doing.
That's what I was getting at. Yeah.
It was a retail environment that they were like, wait, you're doing IVs in a retail setting? You're doing injections in a retail setting? They didn't understand how that was being done. And so, for us and for everybody in this space, it took those agencies a good 2, 3, 4 years to really catch up to who we were and what we were doing. We went through 3 different legal agencies to make sure that we were getting the appropriate advice. So I triple checked the system to make sure that we were good and compliant. But I would tell you that, all 50 states operate differently. No one state operates the same, which is very frustrating. But at the end of the day, we make sure that we surveil the field every single month. If a law changes in South Carolina or Florida or Nevada, doesn't matter, we pivot immediately. We do quarterly releases in the company based off of compliance. Normally, if there's a new law that comes out, they give you a good time frame to kind of rectify that and abide by it, right? It's not immediate. But for us, we do have a full-on medical advisory board that does surveillance across the entire nation, 50 states wide, to make sure that we are compliant, because our business is so unique that the compliance and regulatory side of what we do can either set you up for success because you're doing things the right way, or can bury you because you're doing things the wrong way.
Yeah, I totally agree. Who would you say are some referral partners? Like what's a classic relationship that your local franchisees should build to help them drive business?
Oh, man. So I'm really big on community engagement. I think people sometimes miss the fact that even though a big brand like a Chick-fil-A or an Orange Theory or, McDonald's, they're a massive company, but that's a local person that bought that business. So for me, it is a small business. It is a local person from that community that's trying to pour into their community. So for us, I always talk about local to marketing. Even though you're in a franchise, you can't lose that ability to get your community to understand that you are a small business. And so all the networking events, the dinners, the Chamber of Commerce, the going to the 5K runs, engaging with the high schools and the colleges and the middle schools. And, I know there's different, biking clubs or running clubs, or, there's even mom groups. There's so many different things that you can do to plug into your community to be relevant and honestly get people to understand that you are a part of that community. You, your family, your friends, your connection.
Still a local business.
It's still a local business. And so for me, the moment that people lose sight that they are still part of that small community is the moment they become that 900-pound gorilla that people don't feel like they can touch. And so, being ingrained, and I always tell franchisees, you have to work on your business, not in your business. Yep. So if you're stuck inside of those 4 walls 7 days a week, you're missing the boat. You have to get outside. You have to employ a manager that you can trust to run that day to day. And you got to go shake the hands, kiss the babies, make relationships. That is your goal as a business owner. You are a relationship manager in your community.
When you think about your family franchisees, are many of them multi-unit owners, or are they single unit owners?
Yeah, so we don't have any single unit owners in the system. Every franchisee we have is a multi-unit owner. I would tell you, it's been a gradual approach. I always correlate it to football. Sports is kind of analogies that I put out. When we launched the franchise, we were just recovery and wellness. So we weren't practicing medicine, no medical services. We were playing high school football, right? And in 2019, when we bolted on a medical service, medical directorship model, we kind of went from high school to college, right? We graduated to the college level. And in that transition, we lost some franchisees that couldn't operate at that level, right? We had some locations that sold to high performers. We had some locations that sold back to us corporately because they just didn't cut, that collegiate level of where we were at. And then in 2021, when we actually are practicing medicine, we rewrote all of our franchise documents to be a medical franchise. Well, now we're playing professional ball, right? We're no longer on the college field. And so that takes a different caliber of a franchisee and an operator, where we lost some franchisees in that transition, people that couldn't graduate to the professional level, to the operator that we need today. And it's not like they were bad people. They weren't. Oh, no,
it grows beyond what they're wanting to do. It's not a good fit anymore.
And so again, it's either you're taking that approach and you're learning the new systems and you're graduating with the brand, or we have to find operators that actually fit that mold. And so once again, just like we're being intentional with the guest side of things, the customer journey, I'm also being intentional with the franchise journey. I want to make sure that franchisees are set up for success. And if we have to grow them, if we have to learn together through that process to get to that collegiate and professional level, let's do it together. And we do that through iCryo University. We have an entire learning and classroom platform to kind of get them up to the educational level we need them to be. But at the end of the day, if they just aren't cut out for this business, that's okay. We'll acquire that back as a corporate center. We'll sell and transfer that location to a high performer, and we'll call it a day. We've got some great franchisees that have exited the system that I'm still friends with today.
Sure,
and so,
of course.
I put the relationship first, put the business second. And it's all about, are we at the right place at the right time with the right people? And as we evolve as a company, the people have to evolve with it. We have to be very pivotal. We have to be very agile. What you heard me talk about earlier on this interview is we have to be agile as a company because our industry pivots so much.
Oh, especially in today's day and age. Well, are there any closing thoughts you got for our listeners today?
For me, I just try to add as much value as much as I can. So whether it's on the service side, whether it's on the franchise side, business in general, or just connecting in relationships, I always encourage people to reach out to us. You can find us on social media platforms. You can find me on social media platforms. You can go to our website and submit an inquiry. We're always here to help. I mean, at the end of the day, I just want to make sure people know the right things, they understand the right things, they get educated in the process. And all in all, we can make the world a better place.
Well, I really appreciate you've been listening to Kyle Jones, the CEO and co-founder of iCryo, and that's the letter I, like an income, iCryo.com. Thanks so much. I really appreciate you being here today. This has been a great episode.
Thanks, George.
Thank you for tuning in to Fortify Live. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the Business Growth Show podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. We air weekly at 11 a.m. Central Time. So until next week, keep pushing the boundaries and never stop growing.